The Warriors have until June 28th to decide if they want to pick up the team option on Chris Paul's $30 million deal next year. What is he going to be, 40 years old? So not likely they pick that up unless there is some sort of strange trade scenario that would make sense. They could restructure it, right? Not pick it up and he re-signs with the Warriors at a much different number, right? Just kind of a I want to be here and finish my career type of David West deal. But more likely, there could be a sign and trade where they work something out with another team that he fits and the Warriors get something back in that salary spot, right? It's all about maneuvering the salary cap. Now, Mark Stein reported about a week ago, I'm sure a lot of you have heard, that the Spurs are a team to look out for when it comes to Chris Paul. In fact, some of these betting sites, right, they have the odds, like the highest odds for his next landing spot, San Antonio. And it makes a lot of sense. It does. You look at Wemby and him under Chris Paul's tutelage short term. He's a Spurs type of player. I'm sure it's not the first time they've discussed acquiring him throughout his 20-year career. He's known Pop probably since he was 17 or 18 years old. And you saw towards the end of the year, Wemby really kind of broke out as they started to get him the ball and kind of nurture his game. But that is an issue with this young Spurs team. They don't really have a point guard. They don't have anybody to set the table. I know they have Trey Jones, but he's young. And all the Spurs guys are kind of looking for theirs. They're all looking to establish themselves in the league. And that doesn't lend itself to Wemby's growth. And so just a bridging of the gap and spending a season or two with Chris Paul makes a ton of sense for the Spurs and Wembanyama in particular, so that they can be a little more competitive and pick up on that priceless knowledge. Listen, when it comes to getting tickets to your next big event, it shouldn't be a hassle. But for some reason, a lot of the time it is, depending on the app you're using to get your tickets. Now, I've had an experience where I've gotten tickets and they were listed wrong. They were in a completely different state, but no refund policy. I ended up having to try to relist them. And that's one of the many reasons I stick with the GameTime app, because your purchase is covered by the most flexible customer service in the ticketing industry. My cousin and I, we were in Las Vegas for Summer League and we were having a good time. We also wanted to go to the UFC that was taking place that weekend, but we couldn't find tickets that we thought were of good value. And again, GameTime comes through with the last minute ticket deals. We end up having probably the best experience I've had at a MMA event ever. Floor seating. I don't even want to tell you the deal we got, but we felt good about it, right? And GameTime, I mean, it's easy. You get flash deals, and then again, you get backed up with customer service where if there is a mistake or something needs to change, you're actually going to feel taken care of. Now, my next plan is for this Mercury Fever game, Sunday, June 30th, out here in Phoenix. And can you take a guess why? We want to go see Caitlin Clark. And I'm assuming she's going to be the number one pick, pretty safe, right? So I think we're going to go ahead and try to get these rare, fine diamond. They point it out for you. You don't have to go searching. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use the code ALCHEMY for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but again, create the account and use the code ALCHEMY for $20 off. Download the GameTime app for last-minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Now, when you look at their roster, there are really only two players that it kind of makes sense with: Keldon Johnson and Zach Collins. Keldon Johnson, on paper, in a vacuum, is probably the better player. He's been more productive. He's certainly been more durable. He's, 24 years old, 3-year, $19 million per contract, and he averaged 15, 5, and 2 in 29 minutes for the Spurs. I'm not against it, but I think that Moody can do a lot of what he does better given the opportunity. In fact, if you had switched their roles, if Moses had spent his last 3 years in San Antonio in a development situation where he gets a lot of opportunity, I think his numbers would look even better. We wouldn't even be discussing this. And so I just think that would kind of block Moody, and they have some similarities. So I'm not, even though he may be the better player in a vacuum, I'm more interested in Zach Collins, who Durability has been an issue. It's clear, but is he the West Coast Mo Wagner? I like to call him Big Twilight, right? But he's feisty. He has a high motor, and he's kind of better on paper and in theory than he has been production wise. When they brought him in and they gave him a generous deal, he's on a deal 2 years, 16 mil per at 26 years old, which was a lot when you considered his lack of availability early in his career in Portland and whatnot. But on paper, I keep using that phrase, they thought it would fit well with Wemby because he's supposed to be able to stretch the floor. And you have these guys that could spread the floor out and play together, but his shooting splits less than desirable. 48%, 32% from three, 75 from the line. Is he a better shooter than that? I don't know. The fit wasn't great is the bottom line. And, I think that obviously he will stand out and shoot the three. How well he can do it, how much can he improve? I haven't watched him enough to say, is he taking bad shots, right? Is it just a broken shot and he should get off that 3-point line? But I think for the Warriors, it adds another big body. What is he, 6'11", 7 foot? The motor is not an issue. His skill isn't an issue. He's a decent backup big man who at 26, his body has gotten stronger, and he played 69 games last year. So I wouldn't mind a sign and trade with that and taking a shot at adding a big body who would fit the Warriors system. I also mentioned Trey Jones. I'm not sure that makes a whole lot of sense. I think he's the one guy that kind of worked well with Wemby late in the season. You'd imagine they'd want to hold on to him, and that would be part of the Chris Paul tutelage. And then from the Warriors' perspective, do you want to get smaller? I mean, you're looking to get bigger, right? We're looking to get bigger. So I'm not sure about that. I'm sure some of you in the comments will bring up Devin Vassell. Get real. That's not happening, right? But yeah, those are my thoughts on CP sign and trade to San Antonio. Keldon Johnson, I think it kind of duplicates what Moody does. Zach Collins, I'd be willing to see what he looks like in our system just for the size and aggression alone. Now, as we watch the Orlando Magic crash out here in the first round, it's been a good season. I think that objectively, you say it's a successful season for a young Magic team. Paolo, year 2, took a step. Jalen Suggs remained healthy. He got chipped up the other night, though. But it looks like they're going to get knocked out here pretty easily and kind of a welcome to the playoffs moment against a Cavaliers team that is desperate to, they're at a different phase with their roster right now. Now, Jonathan Isaac is starting for them in these playoffs. And what did he play? Let's see here. I had this written down. 58 games this year. We know his injury and durability issues. And he shot 37% from three, but he's a very reluctant scorer. Very reluctant. Think Andre. Jonathan Isaac, for those of you that are not familiar with him, and I don't want to sound blasphemous here because Andre, he's a Hall of Famer. Hey, if Chauncey Billups is a Hall of Famer, Andre's a Hall of Famer. I digress. But not at that level. But think of him as a big Andre, a 4-5 Andre, meaning he's just an elite defender and a very reluctant scorer, even though you feel like, oh, you probably could score more, right? But durability has been an issue with him. See, he's going to be on the final year of a non-guaranteed deal, just like Chris Paul, 17 mil. It seems like it would make a ton of sense. Sign and trade, and you send Chris Paul to Orlando, and all of a sudden we get this big defensive forward that we can interject into the rotation. Orlando, I know they have Cole Anthony. They've got Jalen Suggs. Fultz, I don't know if they're going to retain him, but they desperately need a table setter. If you go back to my video early in the week, I talked about Point Paolo and how they're doing him a disservice by trying to force him into being a point forward. And Chris Paul solves that issue in the short term, right? They don't have to overcommit, but they get a guy with all this experience and knowledge with this young roster, and it would put Paolo in his rightful position as a hub at the elbow. So I think it makes a ton of sense. Now, the other name that you could look at is Wendell Carter Jr. They're front-loaded. So maybe they want to hold on to Isaac. Hey, they extend this playoff series or for whatever the reason is, and it's Wendell Carter, who's 25 years old, 11 mil per. I don't know how they got him on that type of discount, but He's not the defender that Jonathan Isaac. He's not nearly as versatile, but he is more of a center. And he has offensive skill set. He's a guy that certainly would crack the rotation and make the Warriors more physical and certainly bigger. So I think those are two names that Orlando could send our way, and Orlando is a team that makes a lot of sense for Chris in where he's at in his career and where they're at as an organization. When I went through this process of trying to figure out some of these options here, the first thing that I was looking at was, what team does it make sense for? Never mind who would we like. You know, you could look around the league and say, oh, I'd love to sign it. But I think it starts with, what team does Chris Paul make sense for? How about reuniting him with the New Orleans Pelicans? Do they play tonight? They may make a playoff run here. I'm not ruling out that they knock out the Thunder. Now, are they going to come out of the West? Not likely, especially with Zion and a hamstring issue. But they've got salary cap issues. And so I know people are thinking Brandon Ingram. I don't know how you swing that. I looked at the numbers. I'm not sure. That would take a much bigger, more complicated deal. But let's say they make a run here this year in the playoffs, but it doesn't quite work out. Chris Paul is like, hey, I could be the missing piece. This would be more of a Chris Paul ring chasing, and with his blessings, like I think this would fit me going back there. Could the Warriors get a Dyson Daniels? I don't think you could get Herb Jones. Maybe if you did some other things, but they've got all these big wings. I know there's a Najee Marshall. One of these big wings, Dyson Daniels seems like the guy that would make sense. And all of a sudden, New Orleans gets another veteran guy there, and it kind of balances their roster. They're familiar with Chris, and we get this big guard wing defender. Dyson certainly would fit within what the Warriors and Kerr like to do. Now, granted, he's not a spacer, he's not a shooter, but it's a move that would be interesting and I would consider. Let me know who you would prefer if there was some sort of Pelicans deal on the table outside of obviously Ingram, out of all those young wings. Trey Murphy's off the table. Sorry, y'all. That's the same as the Vassell thing there. I got one more team for you. One more team for you. Did you watch Dallas and the Clippers last night? I like that these scores are down. I mean, you know, maybe it's too much of a rock fight, but all of a sudden has the NBA overcorrected with the scoring in the playoffs? I think they have to adjust a little bit, but I have thoughts on that series at a different time. Let's say the Clippers get knocked out here in round one against Luka, because heck, that's kind of what happens, right? Luka knocks them out annually. Harden walks. Harden, did you see him barking at Russ and Zoo? And I think he rubs people the wrong way no matter where he's at. It's like, no matter where you are, there you are, James. But Harden moves on. Paul George resigns. I know that's very speculative at this point right here. And so they're like, all right, we've got Paul, we've got Kawhi, but we've lost Harden. That experiment didn't work. Let's bring back Chris Paul. He will be the leader that we need, because I know that it seemed all well and good for a little bit of time with Harden as point Harden and all. It looks like it's falling apart, right? Chris Paul is the vocal leader, the locker room leader, and the table setter that they need with their offense, instead of this stagnant. There's no pecking order with the Clippers offense late in game. Have you noticed that? It's kind of like, oh, right. And I think Chris Paul would help that. How about a sign and trade Chris Paul for Norman Powell? Again, the Clippers get the table setter, the true point guard that they need in a small window of time. I understand that. And the Warriors get the actual Jordan Poole replacement in Norman Powell. He's at $20 million for the next 2 seasons. But he's a microwave scorer, right? Certainly would play and help. Now, the question, would the Warriors and Clippers even trade with each other? Maybe they wouldn't. But those are my thoughts as far as the sign and trade for Chris Paul. I know covering the playoffs and you know, Warriors fans, Dub Nation is like, well, what about, you know, I'm going to have a ton of offseason stuff. We'll talk about Kuminga's extension, what that means if there's moves around that. And we just got to kind of slow roll it here. We're in the first round of the playoffs. But I thought I would drop this one on my thoughts on Chris Paul, at least as of now, because come June, when we've crowned a new champion or perhaps a repeat champion, the landscape may look different. You may have more disgruntled players or teams looking to make moves, but those are the few teams that I think make sense right now. Hit that like, share, and subscribe. I'm out, y'all.